Hello, YouTube Pipe community. OTC Piper here. Just continuing my Contemplations series, I like to call it. This is one where I like to talk about some of the topics of deeper thought. Normally, doesn't find their way to the community on a regular basis. Because when I, sit and smoke my pipe, there are times when I'm working out in the yard or working in the shop when, of course you're focused on the task at hand. There's sometimes I like to sit and do nothing or read a good book. And I think of things that, require a little, more deeper thought and time to consider. I've always been a deep thinker. And, people in my department kind of, realize that. And there was my partner, they a lot of times will arbitrarily ask me a, question like that. And did so in the academy as well. My partner said, "Mosley, what's the meaning of life?" And pretty quickly I thought, the only thing I could really tell him in that one was living a life with meaning. And that made me think of this book that I've read, and that is the more or less the topic of this Contemplations video, which is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. You can see that's kind of dark in here. And I'm going to read a little excerpt out of it here in just a few minutes. Let me light my pipe. First, I'll be enjoying some Old Joe Krantz, Cornell and Deal, out of my Eric Nording mini church warden. Good stuff. I don't plan to make this series, a book review on a consistent basis. It just seems that when I come across these things, which during my time when I'm reading, I try to do as often as I can, even if it's just a little bit at a time, and just chip away some time to turn off all distractions or leave them behind and get into a good book or something like that. This book is the first book that really branched me out into fictional literature. Up until this point, I had been primarily a nonfiction book reader. Since I was a child, I was very interested in our history and where we come from and what we've grown through. Aside from assignment in school or something like that, and this came from an assignment in college from a world literature class, and so I read it so I can participate in the discussions and the assignments based on it, and it really opened me up to the fictional literature. And there is something that you can glean from that. It may not necessarily be steeped or in some cases not even based in fact, but the things that inspire the writer could also inspire you. That's what I learned from this. It is a fictional book. There's some very inspiring things and concepts that I got from this book. And from that point on, I haven't discontinued any of my reading and studying of nonfiction, which just branched me out into a wider genre, or add another genre onto my regular practices. In this one, the recurrent theme is personal legend, is what they call it. To me, that speaks of one's legacy. There are two events that we are guaranteed in life: our birth and our death. And what lies in between those two dates is your legacy. It determines how you will live on after you're gone. Will you be remembered for this or that, or just be lost in the sands of time? It starts with Santiago, and I'll try not to get too detailed because I'd like people to check out this book if you haven't already. I have a giveaway coming up, and the main prize is going to include a copy of this book, and I would highly recommend the recipient to give it a try. It's not a long read. In my busy life, I finished it in about a week. It's one you could easily, if you had a day devoted to reading, you'd probably finish it in a day. I don't get too much into the specific details. I don't want to give away too much. Santiago is the main character. He's an Andalusian shepherd, south part of Spain. It's not really clear exactly when it's set, but you can kind of pick up things as you go along. But he enjoyed his life as it was. He saw so many great sights, been to a lot of great places, just shepherding and herding his sheep, from village to village, and knew them well. They knew him well, and he has this recurrent dream of a great treasure. That's all he knows. And it becomes the topic of his thoughts more and more. And he's in a village selling some wool off of his sheep, and the merchant's daughter catches his eye, and he becomes very enamored with her and enjoys time sitting there talking to her, and said he often likes to shear a sheep out where she could see him working hard to make something of himself. But he also knew the life of a shepherd wasn't really one that you can really build a lot of good relationships because you're always moving around. He eventually, the recurrent dream of his great treasure and everything just wouldn't let up. And he knew that if he was to win this girl's heart, then he had to definitely make something of himself. So he sold his life's worth book passage to Africa because it all had to do with the pyramids. And along the way, he experienced a lot of very disheartening circumstances, and that gave him the opportunities to throw in the towel and cut his losses and go back and try to get sheep and just continue that life and abandon his destiny. But he persisted on, and he found that in his successes, they wouldn't be possible without the failures that he had to go through and to push through. And that was inspiring to me because our lives in the real world are wrought with failures and disappointments, and how often you see a lot of people just throw in the towel and decide they're going to let something like something that would offset their plans to defeat them. And my life has been in the same boat. There's been a lot of disappointing circumstances, and I know now I'm at a place in my life where I'm happy. I love what I do. But this all when I started reading this book, and I was on a path to be a history teacher, and with my VA benefits, it limited the schools that I was able to go to. There was, a lot of the online universities were not based in the state of Texas, and I needed something that was based in the state of Texas. Even though, they may have satellite campuses here, they were not based here. In the particular program that I wanted to do, there wasn't anything online, and I was surprised by that. How this day and age there's nothing online for it, and very few things in the evenings. And another thing is the VA requires that I be a full-time student to make use of the, I don't think it's that way now, but it was when I was going through it. So I was a provider of a family, worked a full-time job, and it became very disheartening that, eventually I could no longer pursue that degree in that way. And that led me down the path that put me in law enforcement. Because the academy was quite a bit shorter, and I was able to take a night job on a temporary basis while I got through that. It didn't provide enough, but it provided enough for me to keep going at least long enough to finish the academy. Got into something, I wanted, I've always had the heart of a servant and the heart of a protector, and law enforcement seemed to fit. It's kind of the, one of the same characteristics that made me want to go into, teaching. And I haven't abandoned that at all. It may take on a different role or, something like that, but I'm at a place of contentment where I feel happy for once. And all of those things that happened before kind of spell out, kind of describe and define the journey that I've been on, and my journey's far from over. I can look back on that and know that those past failures and disappointments did not defeat me. And that's kind of something I'd like to pass along through this video. I'm going to read this excerpt in here. One of the things that Santiago, he came into contact when he was considering whether to sell his entire life's worth to pursue this, and he met this king by the name of Melchizedek, who had a lot of biblical parallels to the biblical Melchizedek. If I can find it, bear with me. I've highlighted it. Here it is. So, don't forget that everything you deal with is only one thing and nothing else. And don't forget the language of the omens, and above all, don't forget to follow your personal legend through to its conclusion. But before I go, I want to tell you a little story. The king said, a certain shopkeeper sent his son to learn about the secret of happiness from the wisest man in the world. The lad wandered through the desert for 40 days and finally came upon a beautiful castle high atop a mountain. It was there that the wise man lived. Rather than finding a saintly man, though our hero, on entering the main room of the castle, saw a hive of activity. Tradesmen came and went. People were conversing in the corners. A small orchestra was playing soft music. And there was a table covered with platters of the most delicious food in that part of the world. The wise man conversed with everyone, and the boy had to wait for 2 hours before it was his turn to be given the man's attention. The wise man listened attentively to the boy's explanation of why he had come, but the old man told him that he didn't have time just then to explain the secret of happiness. He suggested that the boy look around the palace and return in 2 hours. Meanwhile, I want to ask you to do something, said the wise man, handing the boy a teaspoon that held 2 drops of oil. As you wander around, carry this spoon with you without allowing the oil to spill. The boy began climbing and descending the main stairways of the palace, keeping his eyes fixed on the spoon. After 2 hours, he returned to the room where the wise man was. Well, asked the wise man, did you see the Persian tapestries that are hanging in my dining hall? Did you see the garden that it took the master gardener 10 years to create? Did you notice the beautiful parchments in my library? The boy was embarrassed and confessed that he had observed nothing. His only concern had been not to spill the oil that the wise man had entrusted to him. Then go back and observe the marvels of my world, said the wise man. You cannot trust a man if you don't know his house. Relieved, the boy picked up the spoon and returned to his exploration of the palace, this time observing all of the works of art on the ceilings and the walls. He saw the gardens, the mountains all around him, the beauty of the beauty of the flowers, and the taste with which everything had been selected. Upon returning to the wise man, he related in every detail everything he had seen. But where are the drops of oil I entrusted to you? Asked the wise man. Looking down at the spoon he held, the boy saw that the oil was gone. Well, there is only one piece of advice I can give you, said the wisest of wise men. The secret of happiness is to see all the marvels of the world and never to forget about the drops of oil on the spoon. I thought that was very motivating, and figured that kind of went with what I was talking about. We have to live our lives, and we can't forget the things that are important. And most of all, we can't allow our failures and pitfalls to have control over us and to defeat us. And with that, that pretty much wraps up the video. I hope everybody has enjoyed it and got something from it. I certainly have, and I look forward to the next one. I'll sign off with that. OTC Piper here. I'm wishing everybody all the best. Here's to Contemplations with Warm Pipe.